How's it going? We're in Greece.
It's going great. Can't complain any more than being in Greece, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Can't think of a better place to have an offsite, right?
If I can work in Greece as an American and not have to go to the office in Greece or anything like that on Monday through Friday, I could just come out here and, kick my feet up, pull out the laptop and get some calls done. I'm a happy camper.
Absolutely. Super thrilled to be here and super thrilled to be having this little conversation here. And let's talk a little bit about your journey, right? You're
Sure.
really a very enthusiastic individual and absolutely positive mindset and really full of energy, right? So tell us a little bit about how did you get to being where you are right now?
Sure. Well, I started as many people in sales, knocking door to door, selling Kirby vacuums back in the day for a short stint, and graduated from that to doing retail sales, sold cell phones for a little while, and then I ended up being in the logistics industry, selling different telematics at an enterprise level, and now here I am with LogiNext and just taking it to the next level.
It's really interesting. What do you think is really the toughest part about sales, right? Because the way we see it, I think that's really, sales is what really makes everything else happen, right? I mean, that's really where the revenue comes in. So what do you think is really the toughest part of sales?
I would probably have a two-part answer to that. I think first off, the toughest part about sales is the amount of consistency you have to have, right? You can't be banking on having revenue on a seasonal occurrence or once a month, once in the summer or in the winter, whatever it is. You need to have predictable revenue month over month. And a lot of times, I think clients in certain industries don't operate on that. They get their budgets once a year, or they have a certain busy season. They can't purchase in the middle of December as they're gearing up to fulfill the Christmas season, right? So that is probably the biggest challenge. Is how do we bring these deals in on a consistent basis so that we have the numbers that we need to month over month? And with that, probably the larger challenge is your systems that you have to have in place to be able to do that in a consistent and productive way, because you have to have a high quantity of touch points, conversations, emails, phone calls, presentations, every sort of discussion. You have to have a lot of those to happen, right? You've got to talk to 100 people to find the 10 people that can buy from you, but those 10 people that can buy from you are only going to be able to buy from you maybe in July. So you have to find 10 more people that can buy from you in October, in November, in December, and every other month of the year. So you have to have really, really sound systems to be able to make that happen.
Absolutely. And how much role do you think your personality as an individual plays in making you a great sales guy? I mean, a slightly more philosophical way of asking it is, are really good salespeople born, or really good salespeople are actually made? You can actually acquire those skills.
I love that question. Love that question. Good salespeople are not born. Absolutely. Do I think that my personality, my friendliness, my openness, I don't know what it is. I've got something that people do like, and certainly that's to my advantage. But great salespeople are not born. Excuse me. They're not born because the most charismatic people aren't necessarily going to be the most productive. You can have a great one-off conversation. You can have, you can seduce the customer, for lack of a better word. You can make them enjoy you as a person and be interested and excited about what you're doing, but that's only one conversation. And when you're running an enterprise pipeline, you got to have a lot of those conversations. So it will only get you so far. Now, in sales, I always say, or I always like to think that when you open a deal, it's about making a friend. The first interaction is, how do I make this person a friend of mine? So the conversation you have there isn't necessarily a hard sell kind of conversation. They don't have to want to buy the product right now. They just have to be interested to hear me out and be curious to listen to me a little bit further. So in that case, it is nice to have some sort of personality or presence that people enjoy being around, but that is a very small part of the overall battle.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and that leads me to my next question. How do you keep yourself motivated every single day to endure the real test of patience in closing enterprise deals, because there's a longer sales cycle? How do you persevere and ensure that you're able to work with the client or the prospect to get them to a closure? How do you keep yourself motivated every day?
So I think that's two questions. So I want to table the motivated part and talk about the resilience part, because we all know this, right? This has been an adage for decades, whether it's modern sales from the tech boom in the 90s, or sales door to door, wearing suits in the 50s and the 60s, right? It's a numbers game. So at the end of the day, no matter how good of a salesperson you are, you're working off of percentages. So a great salesperson might get a 10% conversion rate, right? So let's take it like this. If you're knocking on 100 doors or you're making 100 phone calls, you're reaching out to 100 people, a great salesperson is going to get 10 people. A good salesperson is going to get 8 people, and a bad salesperson is going to get 6. Now, when I say a bad salesperson, what I mean is there are going to be certain customers that have been looking for a solution in their space, and they've just been waiting for somebody to knock on their door and let them know that this solution exists.
Once you have a good funnel out there, you're going to have, let's say, 20 conversations going on in parallel at any given point in time, right? 7 out of those 20 conversations are really close to the closure part of your sales cycle. 5 out of those 20 conversations are probably in the early stage of your sales process, right?
Sure.
Some of them would show you a lot of promise. Some of them you already know are going to be uphill tasks, right? So I think they kind of are mutually hedged in some scenario.
Yeah.
And some of those conversations are actually giving you the energy and the fuel that you need to be able to persist across all 20 at a given point in time, isn't it? Does that kind of help address this point that we're talking about?
I think it does, and I think it's an interesting perspective, but if I can take a little bit of a different spin on it, as salespeople, we're so used to having to prove ourselves first and then prove the product and then prove the company and say, hey, I'm somebody worth listening to, this is a product worth considering, and this is a company that you could trust to be able to support you, right? So we're trying to prove our worth and the worth of the company and the product to these customers all the time, as we call qualifying in sales. But I like to flip it on its head. How do I also qualify the customer to be a good fit for me? And then it's a mutual kind of conversation where you're trying to figure out, am I a good fit for you? But I also want to figure out, are you a good fit for me? Because I could be spending all of these calls and conversation times with the wrong customer. They were never going to buy in the beginning, right? So I work so hard to make sure that I'm somebody that you're interested to take that call from. But then somewhere in the sales process, you have to be very methodical about, okay, is this person serious about buying? Are they serious about buying now? Or do they just want to have somebody to talk to? Is it never going to work out? So how can I filter them out? How can I qualify that they're a good prospect as well? Because I want to be spending my time with the people that are going to be the best fit for us and that we're going to be the best fit for them.
That's a great point.
And
it's a two-way street. Yeah.
It's absolutely a two-way street.
Yeah.
And, we think about sales, if we're trying to go out and show, hey, buy my product, me. I got to go find people to buy my product, but really we're helping them out just as much, if not more, right? We're providing valuable solutions that at the end of the day is going to be of more value to them than it is for us, right? I want to give you $10 of value and ask for $2 back. It really is a mutual conversation. And I think especially later on in the sales process, when you're thinking about negotiations and having conversations with C-suite and different stakeholders, that is also really important to keep in mind, so that you can have a sound sort of presence in that room and talk to somebody who's higher up the chain than yourself maybe, because at the end of the day, we're both working mutually to make this sort of a partnership happen that's going to help out both of us. Now, I also want to say, in a similar vein, when we talk about resiliency and how many people we have to talk to and finding the ones that can actually be a good fit for us, it's that sort of same mentality. How can I flip this on its head, right? So I'm not just trying to prove to the market or prove to people, hey, look at me, come buy my product. I'm trying to actually filter them out and find the best people for us as well. So in a similar sort of reversal of, I think, the default sort of perception, which is that I got to have a lot of no's and I'm going to get some yeses, I have to understand and expect that when I talk to 100 people, 90 of them are going to say no. So that no is not a comment on me or my personal ability or a comment on the product. There were never going to be a good
It's just that there's
fit.
no fit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So every no is actually closer to the yes.
Yeah.
So the more no's that I get down, the closer I'm going to get to that yes.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the positive spin on that.
Absolutely.
I think so many things that we think going into sales, it really is, how do we flip the perception?
Absolutely. And I think I take away 2 key points here from what you just said, and it's very interesting to see those perspectives. One is, of course, about resilience. Like, how do you institutionalize resilience in your sales process? And the second and the most important point is about value creation, right? If you're asking for $20, you're committing value worth $100 that they're going to get out of that $20 investment.
That's right.
Right? So if you can establish that equation in your mind first, then you're going to be able to translate that into your customer conversations. And that's going to be the bedrock of everything else that transpires in every other conversation you have with them, right? Because you know in your mind that I have a value proposition that works for the customer and that works for me. And that clarity drives your persistence, your resilience, and your own mindset in terms of investing in the whole sales process, right?
That's absolutely right. You know, we get caught up in the numbers, and we get caught up in, quite candidly, looking to get that commission check as a salesperson.
Yeah.
But when you think about it from the perspective of, I'm actually providing more value in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And we want to move the market forward as a whole.
Absolutely.
Maybe you're not going to buy from me, but if our product is good and it's moving the market forward or the industry forward, then that's net positive for everybody involved. Our competitors are also going to step up their game, and the end customer is ultimately going to have a better experience, whether it's from us or someone else. Of course, I would love for them to be with us.
Yeah.
Either way, we're providing value in their life. We're making their life better, and that is really the fulfillment. Because if you're just thinking about it from the numbers, from the revenue, there's nothing fulfilling about revenue and numbers, right? It's how can I help people and what they do? How can I make their lives better, their jobs better,
Absolutely.
in the whole aspect?
Absolutely, that's a beautiful point, right? I mean, revenues and numbers, they take care of themselves. They are an outcome of a great sales process.
That's right.
And they're really, while they are the end game in a certain frame of reference, but they're an outcome of a great sales process, which is an outcome of a great need to create value for the customer, right? So they're all
Absolutely.
connected. So if we tie it back to the 2 points, right? Value and resilience. If we can really stay focused on value creation and draw our resilience from it and help the client solve an important problem, we create value for them. Like you just mentioned, we make their lives easier, we make their lives better, we make their customers' lives better. And in the process, revenue, growth, billings, commissions, everything kind of takes care of itself in a wonderful way.
Yep.
So I think that's really a good, nice takeaway from how we could go about it. Because this is obviously a very, very tricky conversation about how do you decode the sales secret sauce, right?
Right.
Because in some sense, everyone needs to be a great salesperson, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
no matter what I'm doing in my organization or in my life, right? I'm always selling something, right? And there is something that I'm selling to every stakeholder that I'm interacting with, personally and professionally, right?
That's right.
And I think the more we understand that, and the more we tap into that ability, we can really translate that into a solid professional skill set that can help us, grow in our careers, help our organizations grow, help the business grow, sort of make a net positive impact on every business and individual that we touch. Right? So I think
I couldn't agree more, and I think you mentioned a great point, which is that essentially, life is selling. It's whether it is professionally as your job, or it's maybe I'm an engineer, or I'm in customer care, customer success, whatever it is, and I want to go and move up within my organization, grow. I know I can provide more value for my company, my organization, if I'm in a higher position. Well, you have to be able to sell yourself to be able to do that, right? Maybe you want to get a new job, the interview process, you're selling, right?
Yeah.
Maybe you need to convince your wife that, hey, this is a really good idea for us as a family unit, and it makes a lot of sense. How can you convey that message, and not in a deceitful way,
right,
or any kind of salesy way? It's just simply, how can I make my case as easily understood as possible? Because we should at least look at all of the perspectives on whatever matter we're looking at. We might find that, in discussion, actually, I was wrong. This actually isn't the best idea. But at least I've done my part to communicate as effectively as possible.
Absolutely, and this ties in beautifully with our earlier, the key point that we discussed earlier about value creation. And if I add one more word into this, in terms of how inherently we're always selling, even as a person who is, looking at the personal life, looking at the professional life, you're always selling something to someone. If you tie this with your whole value creation mindset, and maybe we add one more keyword to it, which is, say, driving clarity, right? We're trying to sell something to your wife, or you're trying to sell something to your kid, or you're trying to sell something to your parents, right? It's about striving to help them get clarity around what you're trying to sell, right?
Absolutely.
And because you see the value in what you're trying to sell, and it's up to you to really get them to see that value as well. So it's really like moving the needle on clarity so that all the parties involved in the process are able to see that value. And the moment they see that value, everything else is incidental, right?
That's right.
And it really starts from you being a toddler, right? I mean, when you're like a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, you're still trying to convince your mom or your dad to buy you a candy, right? I mean, it's as
or alternatively, other perspective, parents trying to convince you that, hey, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't have candy. I understand why it seems great right now, but like a lot of things in life, you don't if it's great and sweet and a quick hit right now, in the long term, you're going to have teeth issues, you're going to have health issues, whatever it may be. So both sides have to have that sort of dialogue to really get to the root of it.
Absolutely. And again, if you're just tied into our framework, it's about value creation and it's about giving them clarity. The parents succeed in giving the kid that clarity that, look, you know what, candy is great, but it's not good for you right now. if you can transmit that clarity to the kid understands it. And they're like, okay, maybe I won't have candy, but maybe you could buy me a toy. And maybe that could be a better deal, right? For the parents and for the kid as well. So,
or the kid might throw a fit and he's not going to go for it anyways, but maybe down the line they will at least have principles that they've been taught growing up.
And that'll kind of grow the kid in some way as well, right? In terms of maturity, in terms of understanding things. You take the hit, maybe the deal didn't go your way, you can put it that way. But that lost deal makes the kid a better person over a period of time, right? And you can extrapolate that into the real corporate world as well, because fundamentally we're all human beings, right? And it's all about how do you constantly get clarity, communicate clarity, and then therefore help create value for everyone. Right?
That's right. Sales is communication, but this is across life as a whole. If you can communicate whatever you're looking to, pursue in life, it's only going to help you. You may be the smartest person in the room, have the best idea in the world, but if you can't convince a room of folks, investors, to buy into your idea, then that idea that could have potentially changed the world is never going to become real. It's not going to be realized, right?
Yeah, this nicely segues into this little conversation around communication, right? Because communication is intrinsic to a sales process. That's how you drive clarity, right? So you've got to get better at communication. It's not about, hey, I'm not a salesperson, I don't need to be great at communication. It's not about that. You are a salesperson, whether you know it or not, right? In any shape and form that you're operating on this planet, you are a salesperson. The moment you recognize that, and the moment you start working on your communication abilities, life's going to get better. But when we talk about communication, I want to even dig a little deeper and talk about internal communication with yourself as well, right? Because no matter how
that voice you got to be careful with,
and no matter how good you are, you're gonna have the bad days. You're gonna have days when things don't work. You're gonna have days when you're very challenged despite of your best abilities, right? And in those moments, how do you communicate to yourself? How do you sell to yourself, right? How do you sell to yourself that, look, this is great, I have to stay invested because it's good. Okay, this is one bad day, I gotta endure it. Tomorrow is gonna be a new day and I'm gonna be able to do great things again. So that ability to build strong internal communication skills, in addition to, of course, building external communication skills, actually play out of each other to help you be at your best and sort of weather the bad days and stay more motivated and rise back into resilience, value creation, all of that, right? Because as I said, no matter how great we are, everyone has those ups and downs. You got to build that ability to be strong in communicating with yourself so that you're able to constantly be at your best and constantly improve at being at your best, because that's necessary to navigate the sales process and in general to navigate anything that you're trying to do. Right?
In life, your inner voice is the most important voice, right? Yeah. That is, you can have all the accolades in the world, you can have a great supportive team, family, whoever it may be, that is telling you all the best things, but if you don't have a healthy mentality when it comes to your inner voice, it's not going to work. And that sort of segues into mental health, which I think is really important in sales, and that's a whole other conversation we could perhaps have.
Absolutely.
But for me, the biggest determinator, or the biggest determining factor in making sure that inner voice is calm is because you're going to have bad days, like you said, and especially in enterprise sales where you have these long sales cycles where you're working a deal for 6, 7, 8, 12, 16, 18 months. How do you tell yourself that? How do you sell yourself on this idea that, hey, this is a good prospect, we're having good conversations, this is moving forward, this is a worthwhile pursuit? Because you're going to get questioned about that every step of the way. Absolutely. And also when you're working in sales, they're going to be asking about the revenue, when's the deal going to come in? And sometimes you know that it's not the best time for that deal to close.
Absolutely.
And if I push the customer, it's never going to happen. So you have to have a lot of resilience to sustain that sales process. Now myself, that's personally been a big challenge for me, is those longer sales cycles, because you have to continuously teach yourself or tell yourself that this is going to work out. And I think the biggest way that I personally have managed that is by trusting the process, by building really, really good systems, right? So as you go through your sales career and you get better and better at selling, you learn what things work, what things don't work. You sort of start to build out a formula, a winning success formula for this is what you do to get to the end result. The end result doesn't matter. The end result will come, right?
Absolutely.
But you have to trust that process. So if your process isn't good, or if you're winging it, or even if you're in like a new industry or a new vertical, things are different, then that's going to be a challenge for you. But if you've built out good systems, you just have to trust the process and know that when you do these things, like if you go to the gym every day, eventually that muscle will come in. And maybe your genetics aren't that great and it's going to take some time, but if you do it every single day, well, if nothing else, you're at least going to be healthier and you're going to look a little better than you were before.
Absolutely.
Whatever it is. So you do that by being confident and
Absolutely.
by studying what is working well, and then now how do I put this into a formula that I can replicate as I move on throughout my sales career, different organizations, different industries, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about having the right process and the systems and building your own system, which is scalable, repeatable, and then something that you can keep improving on. But that system and that process is your hedge against all the challenges that come along the way. And as you said, you stay invested, eventually it'll all add up, right?
That's right.
So in that context, since you said you've been, you started selling stuff and then you've been selling all kinds of things, right? So in general, I mean, how do you contrast, SaaS sales, as we talk about SaaS in particular, enterprise sales for SaaS products, subscription products, and so on? How do you see that as being different from the other kind of sales, right? Services or other kind of products, etc. How do you see technology-driven SaaS sales being different from the other type of sales in terms of any aspects that you want to talk about?
So I would say specifically technology, SaaS sales, or even get rid of SaaS, technology sales, or even get rid of technology, enterprise sales. You know, when you're moving up market in whatever you do, maybe you sell printers, maybe you sell some kind of software, whatever it is, there's definitely a different sort of sales process and a different sort of salesperson as well. Some are not going to be great at that. Some are really good at going for a quick close kind of sale, but they're not great at maintaining a deal over the course of 3, 6, 8 months, whatever it is. And I think when we think about sales, we think about all the stereotypes. Some person in an 80s pinstripe suit, Wolf of Wall Street, whatever it may be, Glengarry Glen Ross, those are all the classic sort of movies. But that's not sales. And we think about sales psychology. Well, how can I trick the customer into buying? How can I say the right thing and build buy-in and get them to say yes? If I have them say yes so many times, like if I say, so you guys have a problem with X? And they go, yes. And wouldn't it be nice if you could do X, Y, Z? And they go, yes. If I have them say yes enough times, then when I go, so it all makes sense for you to buy right now, they're going to say yes. I don't believe in any of that. I think there is a certain degree of that down market when you are doing door-to-door sales or sort of single transactional sales. There is perhaps some of that. But I wouldn't look at like sales tips. I would look at human psychology and being an effective communicator more in that regard. But to answer your question, when you're looking at enterprise sales, most of that goes out the window. Sure, when you do a cold call to somebody, you have 20 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever sort of number you want to cite. There's many studies on it. Let's say it's 15, 30 seconds. You have to get their attention, you have to keep their interest, and you have to convince them that it's worth having a conversation later on. So it's going to be very important that you know how to communicate effectively, that you understand human psychology to a certain degree. But that stops quite a bit after that first call. From then on, I really think you're more of a project manager. I think one of the biggest skill sets in sales is, can you manage a project? Because again, if we're looking at this as a joint venture together, right? I want to make sure I'm a good fit for you. You want to make sure I'm a good fit for you. Or whichever way I'm a good fit for you, right?
Either way, like we said, it's a two-way street.
Now we're working on a project, right? If I find a VP of delivery operations and I convince them that it's worth having a conversation and they find out, hey, this really makes a lot of sense for me, they still have to go sell it up the chain within their own organization. And so now we're both on the same page and we're working to drive the deal forward internally on their side, internally on our side as well, maybe as well. So we're both working on this project. So how can I help teach them and train them how to have these conversations upstream? And how can I say, here's who the people that we need to work with is, and how can we work together to make that happen? There's certain things that need to happen at certain stages, at certain times. And so that's all about project management. At a certain point, we need to engage X, Y, Z. At a certain point, we need to do X, Y, Z. And project management. How effectively can you organize your files and your deals and make sure you're taking your notes so that you have all your information, everything's readily available, and that you're keeping the deal on track, you're keeping the project on track, just like any project manager would, right? We have an end date that we both mutually want to get to. There's a number of things that have to happen to make that happen to get to that point. And so that's a lot less of this sort of salesy kind of conversations and more about keeping everybody on track, communicating across the board,
Yeah.
and just managing the project to get to the deadline that we both want to get to on time.
Great.
Absolutely.
So I think let's just change the track a little bit and talk about something else slightly on a different tangent. Let's say for the new professionals, like people who are getting into sales today, right? They're finishing up their business schools, they're finishing up their graduate schools. People who are passionate about sales or want to build a career in sales, what's your advice to them? What are the things that, and as we said, great salespeople are not born, they're made, right? So it's an acquirable skill set. So what do you have to say to all the new folks who are wanting to become great salespeople?
You could have a great degree from an incredible organization, maybe even intern at an incredible organization, whatever it is, looks great on paper. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to prove that you can earn revenue for the company. So if that means that you're going to go sell phones at AT&T, do that and show, hey, I know this is not at an enterprise scale, but this is what I've done in this sort of area. I was the top producer. I had the top metrics in these XYZ different areas, because ultimately, even with the best degree, it doesn't prove to me that you can actually earn revenue. So at any level of sales, if you have some kind of track record, whatever you're doing at whatever level, do it well, get those numbers, and that's going to help you move up.
All right. On that note, I think we can close this podcast. This was fantastic, Keanu. I think we really touched upon some very, very interesting pointers that I'm sure would help people listening to this get some value out of how do you build a great sales code that can help you build a great sales organization that can help you become great at sales and in general as a professional in any area that you're operating in. Great talking to you, and great speaking in this lovely Greece weather right here in Santorini.
Doesn't get much better than this.
Absolutely can't get better than this. So on that note, thanks, Keanu. Thank you.
Dhaval.
Thank you.